Hey Saiko! With the recent release of Little Nightmares 3, and having never played the series, I figured it'd be fun to go back to where it all began. So prepare yourself for the creepy, the haunted, and the twisted, because we're reviewing Little Nightmares. In Little Nightmares, you play as a little girl wearing a little yellow raincoat trying to escape a very not little world. At first I assumed it was an orphanage of the damned, but after a bit of exploration I realized the little girl in the yellow raincoat isn't merely trying to escape abuse and neglect, as if that weren't reason enough, she's trying to save her life. You see, the children in this ungodly place aren't being kept alive by some abusive tyrant who pretends to be loving and caring to the outside world while being monstrous behind closed doors. No, the children are being kept alive as food.
They're fattening us up so they can eat us!
The world of Little Nightmares isn't an orphanage of the damned, it's a cruise ship of the damned.
Dreams really do come true.
While the kids are kept in the lower decks of the ship with little light, little care, and little nourishment, the upper decks are teeming with patrons large and larger who seemingly have an unending appetite for all things edible, especially children. In this world, humans have devolved into bloated bulbous buffaloes who do nothing more than eat and sleep, and I'm not even sure they sleep. It's kind of like a bizarro Wall-E. So your goal as the player is to help the little girl in the yellow raincoat escape the cruise ship from hell. Little Nightmares is an exploration puzzle game that plays similarly to other games of the same ilk, such as Bramble and Inside. You traverse the world by walking or running, jumping or crawling, and you can push and pull or even pick up objects and toss them. You can basically do all the things you'd expect in this style of game. Since everything is about survival, the majority of the game is spent sneaking around and staying hidden. In most scenarios, there's no way to defend yourself, so your options are either stay quiet and stay hidden, or run like hell. I'm generally a fan of these types of puzzle games because I like the idea that if I'm clever enough, I can survive. However, I feel many of the puzzles in Little Nightmares were tests of how quickly you could perform an action rather than how clever you were at solving a problem. This makes me think of another puzzle game called Braid, which is in my mind the king of puzzle games. You see, even though Braid plays very much like a traditional platformer, the solutions to each puzzle rarely, if ever, required any real platforming skills. In general, if you found yourself having to run quickly and jump perfectly, you probably were doing the puzzle wrong because once you found the solution, it was always relatively simple to execute. The challenge was in figuring out the correct solution, not in executing it. It's brilliant. But I feel Little Nightmares was largely the inverse. It generally was pretty easy to figure out what you needed to do to survive an encounter, but the challenge was, could you do it quick enough? I'm not against this style of gameplay, it can make things feel more exciting, but given the defenseless nature of the little girl in the yellow raincoat, and the fact that one misstep meant death, I found myself in a continual state of dread as I played the game because survival was rarely about being clever and mostly about being fast enough to escape the demon's grasp. For one or two encounters that's fine, but the pattern of run, hide, and run some more repeated over and over throughout most of the enemy encounters, and it felt a bit much. No encounter was bad in and of itself, but overall it almost felt like eating a really rich dessert. Sure, it tastes good and might even be delicious, but it's best in small doses. As with many games by smaller studios, Little Nightmares' graphics, as created by the Swedish developer Tarsier Studios, are where it shines the brightest. The character and monster designs are chilling and the environments are appropriately atmospheric and haunting. The levels are blanketed by heavy shadows broken only by the soft glow of lights expertly placed around the world. The color palette is muted and dreary and fits the nightmare theme. In lesser hands, these designs could have grown dull and uninteresting over the course of the game. But the artists knew what they were doing because I never felt bored by any of the visuals. It always felt new and interesting and kept me wanting to see more. Many of the creature designs do ring of Nordic lore, which makes sense given that Tarsier Studios is Swedish. However, towards the end of the game, I was surprised to see the level switch to a very Japanese style aesthetic. In fact, one of the later scenes in the game very much reminded me of Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away. And just to be clear, I think that's awesome. I had an interesting time playing Little Nightmares. I generally enjoy these smaller horror-based puzzle exploration games. I'm a big fan of Inside and really enjoyed Bramble too, but I feel Little Nightmares may have leaned too much into the dread. Mostly because, as I mentioned before, the monster altercations were less about solving a puzzle to cleverly escape, and were mostly just run for your life or stay hidden, over and over. It would have been nice to have more confrontations that didn't simply involve running and hiding. Therefore, I'm giving the game a 3 out of 5. It's clearly made by a very talented team of developers and artists, but too much running away and not enough puzzles made the adventure less interesting than I hoped it would be. That being said, I can still see why Little Nightmares has gained a cult following. So for those who like their games to make them feel helpless and alone, Little Nightmares is right up your alley. Throughout the majority of the playthrough, I was convinced that my Little Nightmares trilogy would end up being just a one-ology, because I was not feeling it. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it's a bit too dark and depressing for me, and the constant sense of helplessness the game evokes just isn't my cup of tea. I don't need all my games to be power fantasies, but I also don't feel a need to seek out the complete opposite. However, the last portion of the game, especially how it ended, did intrigue me.
You've charmed me, yeah?
Not only did the ending make me more curious about the Little Nightmares overworld, I feel it hinted at something gameplay-wise that perhaps Little Nightmares 2 might explore. Now, I've not read or seen much on Little Nightmares 2, and I'm going to keep it that way as I like to go into my reviews with as little pretense as I can. But the ending of Little Nightmares made me curious to see how they may have evolved the gameplay and opened up the world in Little Nightmares 2. Therefore, I'm not quite ready to wake up from this nightmare. I'm going to give the series another shot to see if it can keep me coming back for more.